Hello and welcome to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Kara and I am currently living in the Dominican Republic. Today I am going to be talking about my experience living in Honduras during the pandemic. So when the pandemic started in March, I was in Honduras. And what happened, as I think was a pretty universal experience for everybody, is that we learned that we would not have school for 2 weeks. As a lot of people thought, I'm sure, we just thought it would be the 2 weeks and then we would be back. But obviously it turned into something much greater than that. So first, we got put on a pretty strict lockdown. We weren't allowed to go out, and eventually masks started being required in all stores or just public areas. So that became a pretty universal practice everywhere, obviously, so that's pretty similar. The one difference that I experienced between Honduras and here, as well as the United States, was that in Honduras we had to go by a schedule of when we could go out. And that schedule was if the last number of your identification, so for me it was my passport, for other people a driver's license or other type of identification. You looked at the last digit, and if it was 1, 2, or 3, you go out on this day, 4, 5, 6 the next, 7, 8, 9 the next. And eventually it was 1, 2, 3 on Monday, 4, 5, 6 Wednesday, and 7, 8, 9 on Fridays, with nobody going out the other days of the week. So it really was very quiet during that time, and eventually I have learned that the system they are using is even more strict, with each day having only 1 digit of the identification that is allowed to go out. So that means you were really only allowed to go out every 10 or so days. So that was the hardest thing to get used to, and ultimately I ended up leaving Honduras about a month and a half into the pandemic and returning to the United States. At that time, there were no flights going in or out of the country except for some US citizens, which were going back to the US. I got on a commercial flight and headed back, and the hardest part was that my city was on lockdown, which means nobody in, nobody out, because no one in that city had tested positive for coronavirus, so they were trying to keep it out as long as possible. So in order to get to the airport, it is about a 2 to 4 hour drive depending on the traffic, and I had to hire a taxi who was from the city the airport was in to drive to my city. He had to show them a permit he had to be able to transport me, to be able to let into the city. And then he had to pick me up. We left the city, and it was a very quick ride because there was nobody on the roads. So honestly, of the 3 countries I have lived in during this pandemic, Honduras was the most strict. And when I left, my taxi driver even asked me, "Are there cases in your city where you're going in the US?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, "Why are you going there?" Because my city was completely free of any cases. So yes, it was a hard decision to go home, but I was living alone at that time and I was missing my family, and so I ultimately made that decision to go home, to be with my family, to spend that time with them since we would all be at home together. And also with the curfew hours and the going out based on the identification, the one thing that was also very considerate was that for the elderly, for pregnant women, and for other people at risk, they had hours in the morning that were reserved for them to go to the grocery store, to the bank, so that they would be extra protected and not exposed to the rest of the public, who is usually considered not as high risk. So I really felt like Honduras was handling the pandemic really well, especially when I was looking at the news in the States and the cases were climbing, and just hearing from my family and friends, there wasn't really much being done besides making people wear masks. So that was one thing that I really appreciated about living in Honduras was that they really took it seriously. And I can't speak for how they're handling it now since I don't live there, but that was my experience when the pandemic started in March, and I stayed through April as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope you learned something new. Please share with me in the comments below what you think of how Honduras handled the pandemic versus the United States, or if you watched my last video, how it compares to here, the Dominican Republic. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. I will see you again in the next video. Bye!